Hello and welcome to the SCIAC Report. I am Orion Powell here with
Alejandro Flores.
and we have got some of the best games of the SCIAC this week. We've got football, we've got volleyball, we've got water polo, which should be really interesting. And of course, we've got some basketball coming up for you here on the SCIAC Report.
Stay tuned.
Up first, we got football, and Chapman is in for the SCIAC bid for the D3 football conference, D3 championship. I apologize. And it should be a great game as it is a rematch for Chapman against Whitworth, who we saw early this year in a fairly close 17-24 game. I cannot wait for this to happen.
It was awesome. It was the first home game for the Chapman Panthers this season. You know, it was a game I had the privilege of being able to call as well, so I got to see it go down. And this is a very different Chapman team from that Week 1 matchup. If you recall,
Absolutely. Chapman
had Nathaniel Espinoza at the helm back in that Week 1 matchup. Then all of a sudden it went to Pacheco after Nathaniel's injury. Then it went past Pacheco
to Luke Peterman, who has just kept this team going steady for not even 5 games, like 5.5 technically, barely half the season, and he has been solid this year. He has had a passing percentage of 68 and over 830 yards passing in just 5 games, which is just ridiculous for coming in behind 2 other guys and never taking a snap of college football.
Well, it makes sense, though, too, in a sense of how he's improved each week. I mean, as a quarterback, it's hard to just get thrown right in and tossed into a match with, especially when there's so many quarterbacks on the depth chart. Peterman was someone who was working with the team 3 receivers in practice. He never even got the chance to throw the ball to Amir Adams once in practice, probably at all. So, I mean, first of all, I think that's something that he definitely loves to have, is that ability to do so. But seeing how he's progressed, how he's figured out his receivers, and John Legman and Amir Adams, as I mentioned, and using the running backs out of the backfield, such as Isaiah Woods, Gio Ursino, using those targets, and each week has been a better week for him. He killed it in senior week. Then he goes into the SCIAC Championship game and plays his best performance of the season. Insane
games from it. I also want to talk about how close these teams are statistically.
Yeah.
Right? You look at the stat lines. You go average yards per carry, 4.7 for Chapman, only 2.5 allowed. You look at Whitworth, it's almost identical, 4.5 and 2.8.
Yeah.
You go yards per completion, 9.18 completed for Whitworth, 6.88 allowed, 8.34, 6.17. Yeah. They are just ridiculously close teams. And I would not have thought they were ever going to be this close at the beginning of the year.
Well, they were very close in their matchup as well.
Absolutely.
You have to recall that in the end, their matchup, again, only ended in just a 1-touchdown game. It ended in a late-game interception that ended up winning Whitworth the match. But overall, when you look at the statistics from those 2 matches, it was extremely close between both of those teams. Time possession, very similar. Total yardage was the only major difference, but outside of that, everything else, the main statistics that you would say for a football game that kind of determine how a match goes, total amount of plays, possession time, everything, even. Yeah. Even lock.
Absolutely.
It was as close as can be, and it was really just a couple play difference, and it was the fact that Chapman had really the only turnover of the match.
Yeah.
That really changed the course of the game, because Chapman was up by 10 going into halftime. They just didn't score in the second half.
There you go.
And for Whitworth, you have a great guy, Salgado. He was the MVP of the game in that match, running the football. That's going to be the key for Whitworth, is trying to be able to establish that run game again and see if you can get him going.
But they have to contend with Chapman's defense, however, who couple of key players off that. Linebacker number 7, Cade Jordan, a.k.a. Miniature Thor, due to the hair, leads the team in sacks with 4.5 for a total loss of 28 yards. And this has just been announced earlier today, he is SCIAC's defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
He has had an incredible year and has been a key piece in this Chapman defense, who is just full of incredible players. You got number 45, Alexander Tariquez, who has had 4 sacks. You've got Jordan Keefe, who has had 3 interceptions on the year. Yep. Just some incredible defensive players. And we were discussing this earlier. 3 of the top defensive Chapman players have made it to all SCIAC.
Yeah, and not to mention you have 3 defensive players for Chapman who all have 3 interceptions on the season as well. You have ball hawks. in that secondary. But then you also have a great quarterback with Whitworth.
Yeah,
as you mentioned.
You have an incredible quarterback. Number 4, Austin Ewing, has had 2,257 yards this year alone and 21 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And has a completion percentage of 71%. Now, I should preface that while that looks a lot better than Peterman, Peterman's only had half the season.
Yes.
Ewing has been in every game, almost every offensive snap except for a couple exceptions. Like, it is just, but Ewing has had an incredible year. And if we look at the total, numbers, Chapman does. Whitworth has a lot of advantage in the air.
Yeah.
They have a total passing yards of 2,662 this year alone, whereas Chapman only has 1,667.
And if you go back to the game with Austin Ewing, what he did a great job was managing the game, playing safe. He has a tall 6'3" receiver on his other end, both ends as well, two of them. You know, he has great height with the receiver positions, and he knows what he's doing. You know, he doesn't force the ball. He doesn't put his team in any bad situations. He just plays smart football. 71 completion percentage is a testament to that.
Yeah.
71 completion percentage for a quarterback is an absurd number. So when you have something like that, you know you have a quarterback who can be aggressive at times, but knows when to be aggressive, knows when to hold back, knows when to take his deep shots, but plays a smart brand of football. And if he can negate those turnovers, that's going to be huge because Chapman's been relying on those turnovers to give them a short field on the offensive side. Either way, it's a fun rematch.
It's going to be a blast to watch.
In the end, it's hard to beat a team twice. In any sport, it's hard to beat one twice.
Especially with how much Chapman has grown and evolved over the season, going 0-3 and then has not lost a game since October.
No, this is going to be a different Chapman team that they're going to have to game plan for and get ready for.
Absolutely. Should be a blast. Up next for SCIAC, we have the CMS Athenas, who galloped to the top of the SCIAC, going 22-5 on the year, and swept the number 2 in the SCIAC, the Laverne Leopards, in a incredibly narrow conference championship victory, with the first 2 sets ending 25-23, and then the CMS really hitting their stride, ending with a 25-17. Now, Alejandro, we commentated the CMS Chapman game, and we were able to watch that. The CMS Athenas are legitimately an incredibly powerful volleyball team.
Well, and it's when you beat the Laverne Leopards, who also had some incredible height this year, they had someone on the team who was standing at 6'4", you know, and above. That's a lot of hard to deal with, and you have a team that can adapt like the Athenas to something like that and end up getting the win in the SCIAC Championship game. That is a huge testament to what this team is. And the Athenas, what they have is depth. You know, when you have a set and it could go on all the way to you first won to 25, and volleyball being such a physical sport, right? You're diving for the ball. You're trying to jump up, consistently jumping up. I know what it's like to keep doing jump squats. That's not fun. So you're going to keep doing that for a full set. You can't. It's just impossible. So when you have people who can sub in and still play at a high level, but also play differently than the people they just subbed in for. So it's a little bit different a game plan.
You want to talk about their players. Going over some just key players for CMS. You have number 12 for CMS, Jenna Holmes, the outside hitter. She has recorded 353 kills, just incredibly powerful, and 409 points in this season alone. She will be certainly one of the keys for CMS, and they're going up against the UMass Corsairs, who are no slouch of a team on their own. They are on a 13-game win streak, and they are really hoping that momentum helps them against CMS.
Well, that's the scary part. When you go into a playoffs and you have a team like CMS who has really dominated the entire season, right? There's no question. They've handled it for the most part. Outside of the Laverne Leopards, who were really the 2 teams in that conference, they were on a collision course. They were both nationally ranked D3 schools. But when you have a team that caught the hot hand, like UMass, and they're on a 13-game win streak, that is scary.
It's hard
because that's a different team than you may have ever seen early in that season.
Absolutely. It's hard to stop that momentum, right? It's hard to stop that momentum. And here's the thing. UMass stats-wise isn't as good as the Athenas. But the one thing where they do dominate the Athenas is defensively.
Yes.
The Athenas have recorded 1,554 digs this season, whereas whereas UMass has recorded 17-20. And as we mentioned, it's a ridiculous difference. Yeah. As we mentioned, with volleyball, it is a momentum game.
Yes.
Right?
Well, it's heavy on momentum. I mean, we talk about rallies, and then we talk about, once a team gets a set and a serve, right? And they get to serve in that set, and if they keep going, they get one down. Then they get another. Then they get another. You can't see momentum, but you can truly feel it, like, starting to lose. So when you have a team like UMass, the key to winning the game for them is they want to win as many as possible because they want to get them serves. They want to see if they could catch rhythm with the serves and see if they could catch them, maybe some aces and stuff like that. It's going to be a fun matchup to see these two teams go at it.
Cannot wait to see the Athena's power and the UMass momentum.
Yeah. And now what we got is water polo. And it's just 4 teams left. The final 4.
You got Chapman, you got CMS, you got Redlands, and you got Pomona.
Yep.
These are some incredible teams, some incredibly defensive teams, and it should be an incredible conference championship coming up.
It's going to be very fun because you have both teams have played each other twice in this first round of matchups. So you're going to have now a third matchup between both of these teams in the first round. So it's going to be very fun to see how it plays out. Now, for the first team, we got to talk about Chapman versus Claremont Mudscripts. That's going to be a 1 versus 4 seed right there.
Yep.
Chapman being the 4, Claremont being the clear number 1 throughout the entire season, throughout the entire conference. Claremont has led the way. They have been 11-1 all season. Points for points allowed, 368 to 260.
Incredible. Insane.
They haven't just won, but they have cleared the field consistently. They have handled every single game they've been a part of. And when you look at the Chapman Panthers, they've been a team that's had its ups, had its downs, but they kind of found the rhythm here by the end in the conference matchups. And, they're playing right here, right in front of us. I can't tell if you can see, but I think they're kind of ready for this matchup.
Absolutely they are, especially since this is going to be the 3rd time that they've faced each other in 2 identical games against CMS, both ending 16 or 18-5, I believe. But again, if you look at CMS's total, that is one of the lower scoring games that they have had all season. Chapman is going to be relying on their defense for this game. They've only allowed 277 points this season. That is the 2nd lowest in the SCIAC, just behind of all teams CMS.
Well, in water polo too, we talk about defense, but water polo too, a lot of that defense relies on the offense because you want to control the clock. You want to control. There's a 30-second shot clock for each team as it goes back and forth in water polo. So you want to control that 30-second shot clock. The key to doing that for the Panthers is going to be Everett Prusak, who's 3rd in the conference in total scoring. That's going to be a huge factor. And when you talk about CMS, of course, CMS just has to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
They have held control. They've got a stranglehold right now on this conference, and they don't want to let go. So for the Chapman Panthers, it's just going to be that motivation. You lost to them 2 times already, and you lost to them convincingly twice. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, though, because they want that motivation.
Absolutely. You talk about the CMS being just a dominant force in this SCIAC. However, the Redlands are certainly no slouch. If you look at Redlands' 2nd matchup against CMS, 9-8. That is the lowest scoring win for CMS on this season. So we have 2 heavyweights in this conference, and if it goes where we think it's going to go, which is CMS Redlands, that is going to be an incredible final game.
And as we mentioned, Redlands, or as I'll mention now for the first time, Redlands and Claremont are 2 teams on a collision course.
Yeah.
Right here. They're both 11-1 in the conference, almost even record in total. It's been set in stone. The hype is there. You want these 2 matchups. But then also for Redlands, you have a team you're going against Pomona, who's the number 3 seed. So it's a 2 versus 3. And Pomona and Redlands have played each other twice as well. Redlands taking both of those matches, but beating them only by 2 in the first matchup and by 1 in the second. So very close matches. Pomona has showed fight, and they've shown their ability to hang with Redlands. So now it's coming down to this 3rd matchup. Can Pomona really figure out what is going to get them over the hump in that matchup? Because, again, we're talking about it's the hype, man. Everyone wants to see Claremont versus Redlands, right? That's the matchup. That's like talked about this whole season long. But then Pomona and Chapman, our 2 teams are here. It's like, well, don't forget about us.
Yeah, and as as we said earlier, two defensive powerhouses coming into this game. Chapman only allowing 277 on the season, and if it does go Chapman and Pomona, that's gonna be a very interesting game because Chapman lost to Pomona earlier this year in a double overtime game.
Yes, which I had the pleasure of calling, and it was thanks to a incredible buzzer beater shot from the Chapman Panthers that got him into that, but Pomona just kind of finished it out in the end. They were able to get those last few goals, and you saw the momentum swing towards the end. But it's going to be very fun. Again, these four teams, while the records are kind of separate when you get to the second half of it, it's going to be very fun to see how these two teams play it out tomorrow night.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to see who is in the final.
Okay, we talked about now 3 playoff matches for 3 different sports. So let's wrap it up here with the sport that's really just getting its legs going here, which is basketball.
Yep, absolutely. And Chapman, who is currently the next game up, they are playing in about half an hour later tonight. They are playing, I believe,
they are playing a D1 team.
They're playing UC Santa Cruz.
Yes.
Yeah, at Santa Cruz. You can watch that on ESPN Plus because it is a D1 team. That'll be fun to watch.
Cool.
But SCIAC as a whole looking like it's going to be a fun conference to watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to see how this whole conference plays out. And you gotta really, for a lot of teams, it was kind of ushering out a lot of seniors, bringing in a lot of youth for the whole entire conference. Now, for men's basketball, what's worth mentioning is the fact that we've only gotten started. So Chapman's only had 2 games so far.
Yeah.
Much like a lot of other teams. Redlands so far has only had 2. You know, you have Occidental that's been the only one with 3, but they've been 3-0 as well. So all of these non-conferences games right now, SCIAC has looked very well playing outside of their conference, which is a good sign for a competitive conference this season. Now, worth mentioning, out of those ones, worth a big notice is Redlands right now, who's averaging 105 points per game in their 2 matches.
That's insane. Two matches, both scoring ridiculously high. Redlands have been a ridiculously fun team to watch because, again, we talked about that young talent. They have a lot of young talent on that team.
And scoring 105 is no easy thing to do in college basketball when you only have 2 halves to play, especially men's basketball. So, and then you also followed by Laverne, who is 0-1, but they averaged 87 points per game. And again, record doesn't matter as much in those early non-SCIAC games because they're playing D1 schools. They're playing in tournaments. They're going to be playing some teams that are probably at a top level above their entire conference. That's not the main thing to focus on. The main thing to focus on is how competitive they are in their matchups. And right now, Redlands seems to be going into the season looking like favorites. And Chapman as well has to be given a lot of credit going against UC Santa Cruz.
And UC Santa Cruz. And it doesn't necessarily look like Chapman's going to get blown out in that game too. Chapman has scored in their 2 games. They just scored 91 against George Fox University, who is out of the SCIAC, and Redlands on their last game against Whittier scored 112. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's going to be very fun. For women's basketball as well, worth mentioning, Chapman right now just 1-0, so their season's getting up a little slower. They haven't started just as much, only 1 game for most teams in the conference. So Chapman's kind of at the top right there, 1-0 on their record, but they do average the most points per game at 84. And for that Chapman team, 7 freshmen on that team, all 3 of their leading scorers being freshmen as well. So you want to talk about a young team. For that Chapman's women's team, that's especially young.
First of all, we got to mention Cruz Billings, who is just, you watch him play, he is one of the fastest players on the court, and I think in the SCIAC. Honestly, he moves up and down the court insanely fast, and he was 3rd overall for Chapman in scoring last season. You also for Chapman, you have Jake Heberly, who was 2nd overall in scoring last season, who is basically the physical opposite of Cruz Billings. Big, does damage in the paint. Just a great Chapman team overall. Yeah,
so it's going to be great to see how both of these teams really start to take shape. Again, they're going to just barely get started this week. Then they take a week off because everyone wants to go home and see their family for Thanksgiving, me included. And then you move, once Thanksgiving week is passed, it's a straight shot from there. They continue to play basketball all the way in through the winter. No matter if you're a semester system or quarter system, they play all the way through winter, December and January. and get all those matches in, and then that's when the season's going to start ramping up, and then we're going to see who's really the top dogs in the conference. But it's just going to be fun to see how it all plays out. So that is it for our entire SCIAC recap. We covered a lot of the sports, 3 of them going into playoffs,
Absolutely.
1 just getting started. It's a very exciting time for the SCIAC Conference. It's starting to usher in the winter sports, put away the fall sports, and it's going to be very fun to see how this all plays out.
That Chapman Whitworth football game is going to be a blast to watch. The Athenas versus the Corsairs for volleyball is going to be insane. I think defense is going to be huge on that one.
The 4 bracket playoff for water polo and basketball really just starting to get ramped up. Yep. We want to thank you guys for staying tuned in for the SCIAC Conference Report. I've been Alejandro Flores.
I've been Orion Powell.
And we hope you have a great night, friends.
Thanks for watching.